You do not have to ask for permission to save your own life. I felt like I did. I was waiting for someone to tell me it was okay to go take care of myself. And that cost me.
Hey, it's Nikki Llewellyn Gregory, and you're on Gut+Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it. Hey, it's Nikki. And warning, my guest today will probably tug on your emotions. She is a globally recognized leader and in this niche of talent acquisition, especially at the leadership and executive level. So many leaders that listen to this, just keep my guest today that you're about to meet in mind for the excellent work that she does. She's been recognized, she and her team, in Fast Company, the Wall Street Journal, Essence Magazine. There was a big long list, but I picked 3 of those to share. And throughout her career journey, a concept was born. So we're not going to be talking too much about talent acquisition today. We're going to be talking about this life story, this thing called Work Twisties. And it's her story turned passion project to help more people who are struggling with, I'm going to call it, this thing that many of us haven't been able to put our finger on. And I will say, like me. And that's why I say I brought the Kleenex, because our first conversation, I was like, I am so sorry. I just can't keep it together. I just, because I felt like you're putting I don't know, a definition. I don't want to say label, but you're helping to say, yeah, that's a thing. That's a real thing. And I have been in that space. My story was different than hers, but I could feel it. And I'm like, gosh, it just brought me peace to know that like someone else could understand that phase of life that I went through that I never want to go back to. And I would really love to find a way for people that surround those of us that have these experiences, like to understand it, to support those people. So Ify Walker, I am so glad that you're here today. Your story touched me. It inspires me. I know that you are on a mission to be sharing this story much more, and I'm glad that Gut+Science gets to dig in. So welcome. I want to start with, can you share this? Because the word is catchy. I don't know if it's a word or a phrase or whatever you want to say. Is it all together? Work Twisties. What is Work Twisties?
The work twisties are an experience of losing sense of purpose, place, position, and for a lot of people, protection, right? And so, a lot of us are very familiar with Simone Biles' experience of needing to step away from the Olympics in Tokyo. And for many of us, that was the first time we were really introduced to the concept of the twisties. And this is an experience that athletes face where it's actually really dangerous. It's life-threatening. They lose sense of where they are in the air, where they're positioning, their place, and it causes them to be uncertain about things that they used to be absolutely sure about. And as I thought about Simone's experience, I understood that that was actually an experience that a lot of leaders have, and I had faced it. I'd faced it too, and it luckily wasn't on a world stage, but it was painful. And through that experience, really learned to put language around it, and that was also part of my ability to heal. And so I'm just really excited to be able to share a little bit more about what that looks like, what that is, how to identify the signs within all of us, and also hopefully help others see the signs in the people that they love so that we can address it, right? And give people a sense that you're not alone, you're not crazy, it is real, but there's a cure as well.
And the word that came to mind just right now for me, and the realness of what I could share that I felt, was almost hopelessness, because the thing that brought me the most energy and was who I am, like what I felt like I contributed to this world to be for other people. And then when that felt like it was gone, it was like grief, and like, would it ever be back? And like just this hopelessness feeling, and hopelessness translates, into like, then what am I here for? Right? It is a big deal. And so could you talk about when this became really real for you, and why this became like the topic around something that you want to speak about your story?
So I am the child of immigrants. I sort of grew up knowing a certain set of things about what I was supposed to do and the track I was supposed to follow. And through all of that, my father was my ultimately my biggest champion and supporter. Right? There is, I mean, essentially my hero. Right? There was nothing that he thought I could not do. And then I lost him right for the pandemic, and it was devastating. It was shattering. And this was at a same time where I was growing my company. I was sort of on a mission to take our company and our method around hiring more broadly. But I hit this place where I suddenly didn't know how to do anything. Like I didn't know how to lead. I didn't understand what I stood for. I didn't know who I could trust. I didn't know, essentially, I didn't feel like I understood what my values were. And this was all along the same time where a baton was passing from one generation to the next. That's what his passing ultimately meant. It also meant I didn't have the same protection. The person who believed in me in an unreasonable way, right? Every person deserves to have one person who believes in them in an unreasonable way. That was gone. And then to have the thing that I knew for sure that I know how to lead. I started up this company. I know how to build. I know how to hire teams. I do this for a living. And all of a sudden, people are looking at you and you don't know what to, I don't have anything. I have no answers. I don't know what I think. I don't know what to believe anymore. I would find myself, even on vacation, curled up in a ball and just sobbing, right? I'm in Tulum with my husband. This is supposed to be a getaway. And I could not understand what was happening to me, and it was terrifying to go from a place of being so sure about who you are, what you do, what your identity is, what you're great at, and then to feel like, "Do I even know how to do anything? What is my purpose? What am I even doing here?" Maybe somebody else should step in and take it, and just not understanding, quite frankly, like, if it would ever end. Right? And that was the beginning of a period that, I wouldn't wish on anybody.
Well, and I can just so much resonate with the number of these things that are coming up for me from this clear and future forward and vision to confused and lost and just, even the smallest task of making a decision like that would typically take 30 seconds. It's like, why is this on my list a week later? You know? And not questioning it, am I mean, it's hard in that moment to still, like, believe in yourself and not like you're gonna overcome something because it's, like, so shockingly different, right? So, oh gosh, and I do have to just say, you mentioned something about people that like your dad that believed in you
And unreasonable.
unreasonable. Yes. So, as you were talking to, just a little high point here, truth you can act on. Those are all little tips. I'm like, what if we all chose to be a person that was known for believing in others in an unreasonable way? What if we just did that? Like 2 people that are around us, we just believe in them because why not, right? The other side, what does that do? Like that is a dose of inspiration in this harder part of the story that we're talking about here. So talk about like the journey for how the Work Twisties comes to be, and maybe before we go there, like how prevalent is this? Like this happens a lot. This is normal for a lot of people. Talk a little bit about that, and then like how it comes to be.
Yeah. In terms of the prevalence, what I was actually, surprised to learn how common it is, especially in moments of transition. I didn't actually know until I started talking about it, and that is actually what makes the Work Twisties so dangerous. If you do not have a cocoon of support to be able to absorb what is happening to you, because if you don't know that other people go through this, you are literally adding salt to an open wound. Because on top of the feelings of, it's like, what's wrong with me? I am supposed to be this high performer, this high achiever who understands exactly where she's going, exactly what she's, people follow me. Who am I if I don't know where to go? Who am I if I don't know what I believe? Who am I if I can't make a decision? Who am I if I'm allowing other people to actually step in and tell me what I believe? Because I don't have the wherewithal to come up with anything better. And so that can be a devastating thing to believe that it's only happening to you. It's like, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. I was ashamed. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought that the solution was go read more business books, go and try to fix myself, go and try to do all the, well, clearly you don't know how to do anything anymore. So like go relearn, go podcast it. I was basically work harder at trying to fix yourself. That's what I'm supposed to go do. And as I began to come out of it and began to talk about my experiences and talk about that feeling of being lost and talk about what it was like to go from being so certain to not being certain about anybody, not even the people I could trust, all the voices that I was seeking for advice that filled me up with so much I no longer knew what I believed. And the number of stories that came back of people saying, oh my God, that's what I was going through. It happened in this year for me. It happened when I had to step down. It happened when I sold my company. It happened when I did this. It happened when I lost my dad. It happened when I lost my sister. It happened when my husband committed suicide. It happened when the stories that just poured out of, I thought I was the only one who couldn't get it together. And I felt so much shame, and that compounded that experience for me, and how much relief people felt to understand that this wasn't something to be dismissed, right? It's not being burnt out. No, people were like, oh, we were just burnt. No, it's actually, it is not the same thing. It is something completely apart from that. Sure, there might be some overlap, right, with other things, depression, being burnt out, but this is not the same thing, even though there may be overlap, right? And multiple things being sort of stacked upon each other. And the relief that came from, quite frankly, being believed.
And when you shared this point about this is not the same thing as burnout, this is a different thing, tell us why it's important for those of us that either go through this or supporting people, like why it's important to differentiate that and what some of those, I don't know, key learnings have been about why we need to call it what it is and support it for what it is.
Yeah. So when I think about burnout, and I run an executive search firm, so we work with a lot of leaders who are hard charging, high achieving, and some people hit walls for different reasons. They've been overworked, they haven't taken a break, et cetera. You can do some things, you can put some things in place, use some tools that we all know about, right? Whether it's meditation and it's taking time for walks and self-care. And it's not that those things are not necessary too in this stage when you're experiencing the work twisties. But the burnout is more episodic, whereas, at least in my experience, the work twisties, that was not a month long, that was not a 2-month long, that was those were years. Those were years. Those were years of having to admit to myself that this was happening and essentially putting together a plan to reteach myself how to operate. You know, Imagine you've lost, use of, you know, I have a brother who went through a shoulder surgery and he's having to go through like physical therapy and, regain his strength and, reteach himself how to use parts of his body. I felt like that's what I had to do with my mind. I had to go back to the most elementary steps and sometimes talk to myself like, you are Ify. I know it might sound crazy to leaders. You are Ify. You are the firstborn of Caroline and Sylvester, right? And walk through. Um, that isn't something you spa away. It's not something you vacation away. Um, you have to go back to the foundational blocks of who you are to remind yourself, like, basically of who you are. And you have to give it the space that it needs and be able to acknowledge to yourself that, yes, I'm lost. And also be able to say that everything is actually as it should be, right? This is normal. but you will not feel this way forever. And that you are going to find your way back to yourself, right? And to be able to do that over a period of time. And when you're on the other side, the amount of relief you feel to not be there is completely different. That's not burnout. That's not burnout. That's something completely different. And I think we do ourselves a disservice for people who, take time off, but they don't actually come back better, right? And I think that's what we do when we try to lump it together with something like, burnout, when that's just not the same thing.
There was a time when you took a pause and you were looking for the word of like how to give this a definition of the difference. And I was going to fill it in with a long road.
Mm,
Like,
yes.
what you did was beautiful. I was just like, that's just what kept coming to my mind on like this difference. And then we didn't plan to talk about when we hopped on here. Hey, they define the difference between burnout or whatever. It's just naturally coming up because I think it's important to understand those differences. But it is this lost and long road. That space that's different. And you did a wonderful illustration, a description of the difference, and I just appreciate that because I think everybody can really understand now, what we're talking about here, and I don't know about you, but anytime that I feel off because I feel like I'm the firstborn as well, and, you're just supposed to have it together and, all these things, and all these people are depending on me, I tend to dive out. Like, my best friends or closest family member, they'll know that if I have phases of, like, just having a bad week or whatever, they're like, I don't respond. Like, I'm out. Like, I'm like, "I don't wanna bring my negative over to you," or whatever. It's one of the worst things that we can do, though, and I go back to I don't know if I told you this, Ify, or not, my undergrad and graduate degree is in mental health. So I was a mental health therapist when I first came out of school, and one of the foundational things that you learn to use as a language with anyone is what you're feeling is normal, because everyone feels that they are completely alone, and the feeling of alone creates isolation and a lot of things that aren't good, right? And it's like there's a ton of humans on this planet, I don't know, 8 billion and whatever, right? Like, people can so much benefit from learning from each other and supporting each other, like and just like you said, when you started to share, you're like, "This person would tell me their version, and this person would tell me their version." So, I just from a person who isolates easily, I just wanna say that it's almost like when you're in a good state and you're like, "I'm gonna push myself to go to the gym and do more reps." If you're in this, you're going to push yourself to have a conversation. You're gonna push yourself to respond to the text, like, and stay connected. It's so important. Talk to us about rather than maybe like, well, how do we prevent this? Or maybe talk about for where you're at now, what are the practices you've learned for yourself to care for yourself, to proactively stay where you want to be as best you can in the life journey that you're on currently?
I think one of the biggest things, I'm really glad that you said, like, as opposed to talking about how do you prevent it. I don't even know that you can. I mean, I think that if you are a human being moving through life, there's a possibility that the conditions will be ripe for you to experience something like this. I mean, you talk to elite athletes, they go through these periods of like, it happens, right? And it's awful, right? But they know and they have language around it, right? And so I think that a lot of the things that we know, to do, getting good sleep and, et cetera. It's like all the self-care things. I don't want to dismiss those things as not being needed and necessary. I think they are. And at the same time, the things that I've sort of focused on a lot are one, surrounding yourself with people who are unreasonably invested in you and who are unflappable in their sense of who you are, so that if you are lost, if you feel yourself getting lost, they can remind you, they can reflect back to you a different story than the one that you may be telling yourself. I think that's one. The second one I would say is retrace your steps. Go back. It's kind of like if you lose your wallet or you lose your phone, or you start thinking about, okay, where was I? Where was I last? Where did I go before then? Did I put it here? Similarly, being able to retrace your steps. What was happening? What was happening in the last month, right? And understanding the conditions that are at play and what you might need to do, what might need to shift, right? To get yourself feeling like you are back on track, right? Those are the two things that I would say, like surrounding yourself, retracing your steps. And I think the third one, I know this is going to sound kind of corny, and I thought it was corny before. People be like, oh, self-compassion. I would literally just roll my eyes. I'm like, look, got things to do in life. Okay.
I'm a firstborn high achiever.
Right, exactly. You get it. You get it. Right, right. Yeah. And when you're a woman, I mean, at least for me, I'm the oldest of six. I mean, I just think that there's all these like pressures of like all the things. But the way that I talked to myself during that period, thankfully, I did not write those things down because I think if I were to read those things back to myself, I would be appalled. But I had to learn a different language about how to talk to myself. You are not a failure. This thing might be failing. You are not a screw up. You're not a disappointment. Just because you are lost does not mean you are losing, right? And the ability to talk to myself in a way that, quite frankly, I'd want someone to talk to my own daughter, right? I think that was the other big tool that I walked away with is to just how could I wrap myself in honestly the kind of comfort that knowing that my dad was still on this earth that we sometimes don't recognize, like how could I within my own self create that comfort for myself? And I found that through learning to talk to myself in a different way.
So good. So powerful and important. I think we all can get better at it. I bet everybody listening, it's like, yes, we all need a little or a big dose of self-compassion and just how our talk track of what we're putting in our head. That might go down like the woo side of things. Let's go a little deeper. During my time, I remember I used to say, or I used to reference it, I still do, as I was in the waiting room.
Mm.
I was just in the waiting room and someone gave me that term. I forget how it came up, and I was like, that's what it was. And I did not like it. 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 But I remember the profound teachings of surrender. And then I read this book called The Surrender Experiment. And then it kind of, snowballed, and all of it being that it is all in the perfect plan of this life experience. And man, the hardness of it, it's like no one wants to hear that in the time, and it's so hard to grasp in the time, as with anything that's hard in life, devastating things that happen. And many, many times we don't ever want to go back and be like, "Oh, I would have gone through that again." Not that, but it's like, gosh, it built me, right? And it's this belief that like it just is. It just is the perfection of our life plan. And then it's how we show up in that, and then what we do to take it and then be able to like share it with others like you're doing, which brings me to like now how the Work Twisties has become a core part of your professional mission, and maybe share a little bit more about what that work is looking like now and in the future, and some advice for this is a leadership podcast, leaders that might be picking up on, signs or insights from people they're around, friends or colleagues or employees, how to be the best for them.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of mission, I'm on fire for ensuring that executives everywhere understand that they're not crazy. That if you are experiencing that, you're not crazy. It's not made up. It's not a stage, it's not a season that has to last forever, right? And I think that is actually the message, right? Because at that point, you talked about it earlier, Nikki, the sense of helplessness or hopelessness. And like, is this ever going to end? Right. And so I want every executive to know that, yes, you're having a human experience. It's one I wish no human had to experience, but it is a human experience. And how can we hold both truths that you can be high performing and successful and experience the work twisties, right? There's a poem, I can't remember the author, but she said something like, you know, we should all have a place where we can put down our armor and still be considered warriors, right? And that's what I think of when I think of the word. We should all be able to create the conditions and have a place where we can put our armor down and weep and still wear the title of warrior, right? Those two things can coexist in the same human and the same set of human experiences. And in terms of what to observe or what to notice in people, this one I think is a lot trickier because I think that for people who are experiencing this, at least I'll say for me, there is a lot of masking and also a lot of, at least for me, there's a lot of masking, but there were also very clear signs. I was not myself. I was angry and I was short with people. And sometimes I was nasty, nastiest to myself, but also some of the people that were around me. I did isolate and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to talk to anybody about this. And I also felt judged by the people who were the closest to me. Like they were kind of like, get it together. You have a job to do. Get it together. You're a leader. Figure it out. So I think when you are observing a leader who is not behaving in ways that are typical, that might be a warning signal. Like, are you okay? That it's okay to ask leader, like, are you okay? No, for real, are you okay? Right? I think that's number one. I think number two, this idea that, especially for a lot of founders are not very good at like taking like meaningful time away from the work. All right. And one of the things that we push a lot now is how can we set aside time for meaningful sabbatical, 6 months. I should have taken time away. Simone took time away. She said, I'm done. And one of the most powerful things that she did was like, she didn't ask for permission to save her own life. She just said, I'm saving it. All right. Like, that's the other thing I would say is like, you do not have to ask for permission to save your own life. I felt like I did. I was waiting for someone to tell me it was okay to go take care of myself. And that cost me. Right. And I think for the leaders out there, I would say, you don't have to do that. Like, it's okay to go away. It's okay to step away into the silence. And, I'm like quoting someone else, but like, and like see what comes to you from that. I wish I had done that. Right. So if I were to give anything to any leaders to say, like, it's okay to step away from all of us. Right. And to see what comes to you, so that you can be whole for the next chapter.
I have a little tip that I do sometimes as I am wired as so much of this other side of like controlling everything, not being able to take a break, like all those things. I have those tendencies and I have two things. I don't know if both resonate or one might resonate, but one is like the reminder that I'm not in charge. I'm not the one that created this world and this universe. Like there is someone way bigger than me orchestrating all of this. That's always really helpful. The other side is if you just look from a science perspective and you do just a little bit of digging on the grand universe that's out there from space and how big Earth is like, I don't know, the size of a pea compared to the sun. I think that's actually, or it's like a golf ball compared to the sun. So the sun compared to the Earth inside, that's just the sun and the Earth compared to the grandiosity of like all the planets and the things that we don't even know. And we like somehow are like, I can't take a break. I can't. Like, I mean, like the world can't run without. It's like, what are we doing? Okay. So those are my two. I don't know if anybody wants to take and steal them, but I have to use them very regularly to get myself back centered.
I love that because, what I'm taking away from that is like the perspective, right? The ability to create some distance, right? To like sort of stand on the balcony and look down and be like, oh, that's right. I'm actually not as, I mean, significant's not the right word, but like there's something that's much bigger than me, right? I do not control all of those things. And I think that's so powerful. I have found for me that works for me in some moments and I slip, right? It's so easy for me to slip. I'm like, I do that and then I'm like right back in it. I have found, and I did find during that time, that part of the rebuilding for me was to find a thing that I could, almost, like, care for, right? Because like, that was, like, a sense of, like, purpose, like, a small thing, right? Like, "Okay, I just have to get my kids ready." That's a win. Gotta get 'em ready for school. That's it. That's the barometer, that's the threshold, that's it. Okay, I've done that. Okay, now I just have to water these plants. They are alive and they are green, and that is charge, right? And that building, that was the rebuild. It's like, this is a box, this is a thing that I can do. You did it. You are needed in this thing, and you did it. You added value here, and you know how to do this thing. It can seem so ridiculous to say that, but I found for myself that I had to almost, whereas before it was almost like purpose had found me, like I had to go and find it, right? In these little, and brick by brick, to build myself back up. So in case that's helpful for a leader that is also in the day-to-day looking for, like, what is the thing I can do today that reminds me of who I am? At least for me, it was even something that might feel really insignificant and small. At the moment, it was everything, right? And that was part of the journey.
And the reminder not to compare the watering the plants task of achievement versus, but what I used to be able to do, right? Like, because it's so easy to slip, but it's like, all we have is today. All we have, it's just right now. To just remember as best you can in that waiting room where you're at. Like, it's just today. It won't be forever, but today, the plants, yay. And then the next thing, yes. So good. Oh my gosh, this conversation is amazing. So much more we could probably talk about. I'm already thinking of like other shows on our network that have to have you in these different angles. So you'll probably see Evie a lot more on People Forward Network shows. Yay. So Evie, before we head over to our lightning round, where I'm going to ask you a few quick questions just to make sure that people get to know you just even more on the human side. Normally, like we're doing a teaching topic. It's like, now let's get to know the personal side of it. It's like, we've been doing that. But I've got a couple of questions before we do that. Any resources or anything that you wanted to share for Work Twisties or offer before we head over to the lightning round?
You know, it's interesting. I've Googled Work Twisties. There's nothing written about Work Twisties. I think I have to write about it. I think I need to create that work out there. I don't have anything in particular other than I will say that just like reading about Simone Biles and her story of how she rebuilt herself is just, and she did that on a world stage with a lot of judgment, a lot of naysayers, people calling her a loser, a sellout, a failure, people who could not even do a cartwheel, having the gall to have anything to say about her, but she did it. And I think, like, the resource I would actually say is go back and read 2020, what people were saying about Simone, and then watch her, this summer, and the confidence, the swagger, I mean, it was almost, as though people talked about, and I knew people were gonna talk about, that she won all these golds and look at her comeback, and in my mind, it's like, she'd already won. Like, the thing that no one could take from her, that only she could give herself, she had. Her energy was like, "I am back," and for me, right? And I think that was such an inspiring and hopeful for anyone who's going through that, to see that if she could, on the world's biggest stage with everybody watching her, right? She didn't owe us anything, could do that and live to tell about it. I don't know. I don't think there's a better example of what we might be able to do for ourselves.
So good. Thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna head over to the lightning round. This will be just super quick, just fun here. We for I don't know 7 years now that we've been doing this show. Favorite book of all time or a recent read that just it's like soul connected to you. It's your jam. Give us a favorite book.
Pachinko by Minjin Lee, which tells the saga of a family through Korea and Japan. And just what I appreciate most about it is that pachinko is basically a gambling game, essentially. I know I'm like not doing it justice, but it is meant to be a metaphor for life and how, you know, a lot of things are kind of rigged and kind of set, right? but it tells a story of all these powerful women who still have the audacity to hope, even in the midst of that, right? And I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a child of immigrants, and there's an instant immigrant story too, but I think it's a universal story, right? Of what it means to be a human is to hope in the face of incredible odds, right? And to hope that you might be one of the lucky ones.
I love that. I'm definitely putting that on my reading list because I haven't read it. Okay, so let's say you're at a holiday party, lots of people, conversation, and there's this thing that keeps coming up that people are like, no way, that's so cool. What is that thing about you that you're sharing?
We live on a farm. My family moved to a farm about a year and a half ago. We live in this town called Black Earth. We live in a black house. We are one in that area. We are the only Black family, and it's made for very interesting conversations with our neighbors and with other folks in the town. But when people hear they live on a farm, they're just like, "Wait, say what now? You lived in New York, you've been in Philly, you were in New Orleans, and now you live in a town population 1,300 with coyotes and turkeys and deer? Okay."
Which are your farm animals?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. What is your favorite thing about the farm or something that you're just so excited about that's coming about around the farm? I don't know. Something for you.
So, honestly, the thing that has been truly transformational for me is that I live and I know, like, we're not supposed to talk about politics, but I find it to be really fascinating to live in a place where people are just so curious. Like, they just were just like, "So let me talk to you about this thing," that you would maybe not think you had anything in common, with folks, but, like, the spaciousness to actually just, like, listen and not jump to conclusions about what someone's going to believe and their rationale behind it, I have actually found to be the most rewarding part of being in a rural community, right? Is that it's just completely different from living in the cities where I think my experience is that it's much easier to put people in camps right away and say, you're like me or you're not like me. You believe what I believe or you don't believe what I believe. But when you have to take your trash, which we do, to the local trash site and you get to have conversations with people on a whole range of topics, I think it just creates a spaciousness to be like, actually, like, Nikki, why, like, tell me more about, like, why you think that, and to be able to actually have a real conversation, right, and actually learn something from someone has been just a really delightful surprise and blessing.
That's cool. So in your work world where you have these large like platforms digitally to be able to share about Work Twisties, this gives you the opportunity to like meet someone that may never be on those digital platforms, throwing away the trash and sharing it that way. I love it. Getting the full spectrum. That's so great. Oh, Epi, it's been such a joy to have you today here on Gut+Science. I've been really looking forward to this. Thank you. I think the work that you're doing is really, really important. And what is the best way if someone wants to follow up with a question or, just to build a relationship with you or whatever, what's the best way to connect?
LinkedIn is where you will find me on all things. So just Ify Walker, that's I, F as in Frank, Y, Walker, common spelling, and you can find me on LinkedIn and follow me there.
Ify, I have all the feels. Such a great episode. I love your journey of sharing the Work Twisties concept and your story to help other people. I think you are just on to the beginning of something so big that's already making big changes in people's lives like mine. Thank you so much for sharing today. Here's my truth you can act on from our special episode. Number one, what if we choose to be the person who believes in others in an unreasonable way? Why not? Why not? Let's be that. And number two, surround yourself with people who are unreasonably invested in you. And what was the concept? Unflappable, unstoppable, unflappable, whatever it is, they are invested in you beyond any limits. Yes, those people. Number three, stay connected. Don't isolate. I do this. I will be very vulnerable in the times that I don't feel like I'm life giving to others and on my game. I tend to isolate. And the most powerful thing during all times, particularly when we are not our best self, is staying connected and allowing others to have the gift of giving to us. Don't take that from them. Number four, take time. You're not crazy when you need the time or you're off your game. It's normal. And this will not last forever. But right now, take the time. Take the time when you need it. And it's okay. Your life is worth it. You are worth it. And take a mini break. Take a sabbatical if you can. It's so important to take the time that's needed in order to get yourself foundationally strong to be able to take those steps forward, those little steps, those big steps, but take the time. Number 5, it's all part of the plan. We get to surrender. And, if you look in the rearview mirror of life, the times that were so hard are many times those stories that fuel others. Ify is a walking, living example of that. She is sharing that very, very, very challenging time. And it turned into this concept she's got behind with the Work Twisties that is now really something that has helped me. Our conversations have really helped me. And I know it's helping others just way beyond Gut+Science. And I just celebrate those of us that can embrace the tough and the hard and see it as, it's so hard to see it at the time, see it as part of life's plan and what we're here to learn so that we can be better and help those on the journey, help those around us. The stuff that connects us is usually the hard stuff, the icky stuff, the challenging stuff. And man, when we go through it and we learn and we share with others, it's just part of the perfect plan. And it's hard to know that in the moment, but that is what it is. And taking that belief. With that, so much goodness in this episode. Such a gift to be with you, Ify. Thank you so much. Can't wait for more things that will happen along our journey. See you next time. We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.